Hello, my name is Knut Mehr. I'm a Mickaboo volunteer and I am planning to show everybody on how I'm making a batch of birdie bread for our birds. We have two female ringnecks and we have one little maroon-bellied conure who love it, who get it daily. And I'm going to walk you through my version of the recipe, or one of my versions of the recipe. This is based on a recipe that was published a long time ago on the Parrot Pantry in Facebook. I got it through a friend maybe 6 years ago, and I'm interpreting loosely around it. And I will walk you through today's interpretation based on what I happen to have around in the kitchen right now. So, we're going to start with the flours we have. I have a pack of millet flour, and we won't use all of it. I will show later how much I'm putting in. I do it by eye, but we will be weighing it so that you see exactly what I've been doing, and I'll talk a little bit about it. So we have millet flour, we have unbleached whole wheat flour here, we have whole grain rye flour, which is freshly ground from the mill in San Francisco. And then I have some buckwheat flour here, which if I put too much in, the birds don't like it as much, but it's supposed to be good for them. Then what we have are some soft ingredients. This here is one big sweet potato that I steamed already and cut in smaller chunks. It will be squished. Then I have 2 carrots. They will be shredded and go in similar to a carrot cake. Then we will use the juice of, right now I have 3 oranges here, I think we'll use all of them. I have 2 ripe bananas that we're also going to use. They will be smashed together with the sweet potatoes. You can use only sweet potatoes, you can use only bananas, you can use no carrots, you can use carrots, so it's very flexible. Then there are a lot more ingredients that we're putting in. I like putting in dried blueberries. The original recipe calls for blueberries, but they are very big over here, and they tend to make the birdie bread a little soggy in places, so I prefer using dried blueberries. I have goji berries, I have shredded coconut, I have some black sesame seed, I have a little bit of ivory teff grain left, and I have a little bit more of brown teff in there, whole grain. It's very, very fine, and in the process of making the dough, it gets integrated. Then we have chia seeds here, and then I have amaranth seeds. And all of those, the original recipe calls for sprinkling stuff on top. I don't like it because most of that just ends up falling off. And so I just mix it all into the dough at the end of the day, and the birdies don't seem to mind, one way or the other. So I just finished grating the carrots, the 2 carrots that I've shown before. I squeezed the orange juice from 3 oranges. I peeled and sliced the bananas to make it easier to smash them in a few minutes. And I also realized that I forgot to introduce a few ingredients that are actually quite important. For one, I forgot to mention that the recipe also calls for coconut oil. I've also been using in the past, with good success, red palm oil. In both cases, the organic version. Cinnamon, I've missed in many times, in many incidents when I baked it, but I get the impression that our birds like it better if I'm adding a little of it, so here it is. And then one of the things that's also mentioned is the oatmeal. I realized we don't happen to have oatmeal in the house, but we have whole grain oats cut into a coarse way, a coarse flour, grit, however you want to call it. And so I'm going to use some of those. And since we don't have flax seeds in the house, and I think it's healthy one way or the other, and the birds like it, We have flaxseed meal. I'm going to add a little bit of that one. Now you may be wondering, geez, this is a lot of ingredients and the recipe is much simpler. And you're absolutely right. I like adding more stuff in, and we happen to have a lot at home, and you don't need all of this. You can do the same with just 2 or 3 varieties of flour, and basically the basics that I mentioned in the original recipe. And what I'm showing here is you can throw in whatever your birds like, whatever they enjoy. Ours don't eat as many veggies, and they're supposed to be eating a lot more sweet potatoes and carrots especially. They don't consider carrot food, but once they are baked into the birdie bread, they enjoy them. So that's why I'm using more ingredients here than are required, so you can improvise to your heart's delight. Throw in what your birds like, what makes them eat the birdie bread. And I will continue now. I need to smash the, what I do is I just smash the bananas and sweet potatoes first, and just so that they are ready, and do one at a time. What I also sometimes do is I just throw them straight on top of the flour and squish them there, but that is a little more tedious at times, so I decided for this little video to do it separately, and it's very quick, doesn't take much time. And then I'm going to throw the sweet potatoes on top, and then I have a gooey mess. And then I'm going to do something similar, no smashing involved, with the flour, and I'm going to weigh all of that. So this is smashed enough. The rest is coming. It doesn't matter if there are a few little chunks. You don't want the chunks to be too large, because that leads to soggy parts in the birdie bread, and at least our birds don't like those anywhere near as much. So that's good enough. I'm just putting the sweet potatoes on top of that. Continue a little bit more of the same. The banana wasn't quite as ripe as I liked it, so it was a little harder to smash. And the sweet potatoes are steamed, so they are very, very easy to smash, as you may be able to tell. And you don't need to have everything perfectly mixed. The birds don't mind if they have a banana-y or a sweet potato-y chunk of birdie bread. And if I don't have both in the house, I just use one or the other, and no harm is done that way. So I think that is good enough. There's a little bit chunkiness still. I think we're good with that one. And I'll leave everything else as it is. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put my mixing bowl on a scale. And so whenever I'm throwing something in, we can tear it before, and then you see how much what I'm putting in. And I have the bad habit of eyeballing everything. So this is the buckwheat flour, and I'm throwing 117 grams of it in. Don't ask me why, that's about the right amount. I'm going to reset. I'm going to put a little bit of the rye flour, whole grain rye flour in, that I showed you before. Probably about the same amount. A little less, 96 grams. It really doesn't matter. The idea is that you're not just using processed wheat flour, and highly refined wheat flour. This is the whole grain, whole wheat flour, unbleached. And I'm taking about the same amount. I forgot to reset the scale, so I'm going to about 200 grams. So that's about 105 grams of the wheat flour. Yeah, it's a little bit more, 110 grams. Then one of the most favorite flour types for our birds at least is the millet flour. I think all birds love millet, so I'm going to reset it again. So I'm putting a healthy amount of millet flour in, a little bit more, 125 grams. And I think I'm going to stop that part right there. Then, so I'm continuing just putting the dry ingredients in. And then when I'm done with doing this, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. So I'm putting some of the flaxseed meal in there. It's a little coarser, that's not a bad thing. Okay, getting myself in trouble by using up the leftovers. That's 27 grams. Then what else do we have? And I'm using up the last bit of the ivory teff. It's very, very fine grains. So I'm just throwing those in. That's about 37 grams. I'm throwing a little bit more of the brown teff. So maybe this basically behaves almost like flour, so I'm putting a little bit more, but it gives a little bit of bite and texture, and that's always something that the birds like. Then I have the chia seeds here, so we're at about 60 grams of teff. I'm putting good helping of the chia seeds. Good helping I define as 30 grams, that's about an ounce. For those that are not as fluent in metric, 30 grams is an ounce, and you can calculate one way or the other. I set that back. We had the teff, we had the sesame seeds, we have the chia seeds. What else do I have? I have a little bit of the amaranth here. Not a little bit, way more than we need. I'll put about the same amount in. About an ounce or so. Yeah, a little bit more. They like it. 47 grams, about 1.5 ounces. And you can improvise. It doesn't really matter. Put in what you have, don't put in what you don't have. Just make sure that it's healthy for the birds, and that you're not putting chocolate chips or other avocado or other stuff that might be sitting around, you might have sitting around, but that you know is not recommended or even poisonous for birds. So these are the shredded coconut flakes. They really, really, really love them. So I'm putting a little bit more in. I guess this is about 2.5 ounces, 75 grams. Looks about right. And I think this is pretty, oh, I'm putting some cinnamon in because it's easier when I'm doing it. And I just sprinkle a little bit, so it looks like it added about 1 gram of cinnamon. This should be about a good teaspoon. So now I'm going to turn off the scales for a little bit. I'm just going to mix all the dry ingredients so that they are thoroughly mixed. They don't have to be perfectly mixed, but it's a good idea to have it just a little bit distributed. And do I have enough? I think I'm going to put a little bit more of the black sesame seeds in, just to have a little bit more texture in there. Okay, now I can see them. that might have been 1 or 2 tablespoons. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at this one here. Then what I'm going to weigh is I'm going to put some of the coconut oil in. And typically I aim for about 2 good tablespoons. So right now it's very warm, so it's liquid, and I'm just pouring 1.5 ounces. Sounds about right. And everything else I showed you already how much it is. And I'm turning this off again, and I'm just going to stir this in a little bit, and then I just add the carrots. These are the 2 carrots you saw a little earlier, and I just grated them, finely grated, the way I would put them in a carrot cake. And it just mix it all through. You can do this with any kind of electric mixer you like to use. You don't want to cut it, you don't want to chop it, but anything that makes your life easier. I like doing this by hand. Now I'm throwing in the banana sweet potato mash. Pot under, gets a little harder, but for me it tells me when the dough has the right consistency, so I don't mind that part. And what I'm doing is, when it's too thick, too heavy, I add a little bit of water, and when it's too wet and a little squishy, then I just add a little bit more flour. It looks like right now I'm a little bit on the dry side, which is not a surprise because I haven't thrown in any of the orange juice yet. I just leave it there. And at the end I'll stir it around for maybe 2 minutes total. I will spare you that part, but at the moment I'm going to first put the orange juice in. Not sure yet whether I'm going to use all and everything. It was about almost 1/2 of a cup, and right now I have about a little bit more. So I put let me put a full cup in there. This is about a cup of freshly squeezed orange juice. And so now I'm going to stir that under. I think I like how this looks like. I think there's still a little bit more flour, so I'm going to add a little bit more of the orange juice. And what you want is, you want a thick but not all too heavy dough. Some fibers from the sweet potato visible, and that doesn't matter. And everything that's in there is something that I wouldn't hesitate 1 minute to eat. And the Birdie bread is not necessarily to human taste, but it is not unpleasant either. So I've tried it, and typically I sample each and every time. If I'm baking Birdie bread, I sample, make sure that it tastes right. So I'm back. I stirred a little bit more, a little bit longer. This is exactly how I like it to be. Relatively thick, but still a little moisture in there. Not too heavy, not too light. And I'm just going to put it on a cookie on a cookie tray. And I like putting a silicone sheet underneath because that makes it non-stick and it works well. And you can use baking paper instead. You can use just an old-fashioned greased cookie pan, and it doesn't matter. You don't want it on an ungreased pan because you may not get it off and it's too sticky there. So I'm done with this, and now I'm just spreading it out. That gets very quick because it doesn't matter much. I try to get it about 1 inch thick evenly, but nobody's measuring it. And the corners don't have to be fine. Some people like putting it in muffin tins. Our birds are small, so muffins, even mini muffins, would be too much, and I like cutting it in small portion size pieces that we can freeze. And this is getting there. So almost there, almost there. And I forgot one thing. I realized I forgot to put in the goji berries and the blueberries. So I'm going to do something unusual. I am going to, this is what happens when you're doing something live. I'm doing dried blueberries on top. I'm going to fold them in a little bit, and we'll see how it works. The blueberries, they give the birds something to chase, and some goji berries on. Normally I mix them in at the end, and they should be in the dough. Didn't quite work out this time, but the good part is the birds are very forgiving and they like it one way or the other. So I'm going to just fold it over. This part is not part of the original recipe. This is my improvisation to get through the mess, but it will work. Now I'm just spreading it out again. I'll do the same on the other side. This is a little thin, this is a little thick. There will be some days where there are a few more blueberries in the birdie bread, and a few days where there might be none. But there's so much good stuff in there that the birds will be happy one way or the other. Okay, I just make sure that there are no very thin parts, no very thick parts. Just make the edges a little bit that they're not getting too dry, but even if they're getting dry, the birds like them one way. This is a little thick. I squish it out. Okay, with that I'm done. I'll just transfer it to the oven. I didn't preheat it. Some people like when it's preheated. I don't care. I just turn it on. I set it to 350. And it's 6:55 right now. Takes about 40 minutes. I'm going to check in again in 40 minutes, and in the meantime might have dinner. So we're back. The birdie bread baked. I had to leave it in the oven for a little longer because it's a little thicker than it normally is. So I left it 10 minutes longer. Allowed it to cool off. And here it is now, And now I just need to slice it into bird-sized bites. I typically try to put it into about 1 inch by 1 inch squares. That's 1 serving per day for each of our birds. And so I just slice it. Again, the exact size doesn't matter. It depends probably more on how much your bird likes to eat or gets to eat. And then I basically just cut it. And now it is also ready. So what I like to do is I like to put about a week's worth of servings in a dish. Put that in the refrigerator. It keeps very nicely if you keep it in the refrigerator and don't keep it out for too long. And then you have portion-sized pieces that you can use for our birds get it for breakfast. And I'm going to slice up all the rest, and it comes in larger dishes that go straight into the freezer and allows you to basically take either bite-sized portions out, individual portions, or what I do is I just have, again, a week's worth supply, put that in the refrigerator, let it thaw there, and then I'm back on. So this is about a good month's worth supply for our 3 birds. And depending on the size of your bird and the appetite, it may be more or less. So now the most important test is to see whether it actually gets the approval of our Birdie tester-in-chief, Jerry, our maroon-bellied conure, and it looks like it has his full approval.